I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners for November 5th, 2019. I invite you to stand if you wish while Commissioner Beasley Brown introduces the person to give us our invocation and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, I want to invite Pastor Laura Vincent up to give our invocation. She is a pastor at Broadway United Methodist Church, my home church.
Let's pray together. Lord God, we come before you and pause this morning or this evening to remember that you are present and to recognize, God, that as much as each of us gathered here might love this city of ours, you love it far, far more. Each citizen that is a part of Bowling Green is someone that you created. There's someone who reflects your image, someone who is a recipient of your great grace, your concern for us, your love for us, your care for us is so deep. And so, God, I pray that tonight that the conversations that are had and the decisions that will be made will honor you by reflecting that same deep care. I thank you for each of our leaders who are here tonight that will guide us in that. I pray that you would give each of them your wisdom so that they can guide us in ways that have both mercy and justice, and in ways that make Bowling Green the most beautiful place that it possibly could be. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Remain standing to say the pledge with me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll.
Commissioner Beasley Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Denning.
Here.
Commissioner Nash.
Here.
Commissioner Perigin.
Here.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Here. Do we have any awards or recognitions tonight?
I do not, Mayor.
Any on the commission? Do you have any comments?
There will
Yeah, I have-
be,
I'm so sorry.
you go
ahead.
first.
You want me to go first? You sure? Okay. I want to wish the mayor a happy birthday as
You're
much
out of
as he's
order.
going to be really mad at me, but, being as today is the
Okay,
day.
we're back to
And-
city manager comments.
Wait a minute.
You hush down
And
there.
also Brent Childers, whose birthday is on Thursday.
That's true.
Thank you all for your leadership.
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Both of them turned 39.
39.
They'll be
I
able
asked you
to
not
get
to
their
do that. I
driving
guess I
license.
communicated with you as well as I did with my barber this time.
It's his birthday haircut up here.
Oh, yeah, by the way, notice the haircut.
Thank you. Do you have any comments tonight, sir?
There will be a need to add municipal order 2019-196 to your agenda if you'll give me that courtesy. It's a late file that we came upon late last week that we need to get taken care of.
Hold on that.
I need a
We do.
motion to add it to the agenda in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perigin, second by Denning. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Any other comments, sir?
No, sir.
All right. Approval of the minutes for our regular meeting on October 15th, 2019.
Second.
Motion by Denning, second by Nash. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-184.
Municipal order approving the promotions of Chad Doty to the position of Civil Engineer 2 and Nicholas Lawhon to the position of Environmental Compliance Coordinator in the Public Works Department.
Second.
Motion by Nash, second by Perigin. Mr. Mizel.
Recently had a vacancy to occur in the Public Works Department. I'd like to ask Public Works Director Greg Meredith to come up and make his recommendation for promotion into that position.
Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Mazel, Mayor, Commissioners. As Jeff mentioned, Mark Absher, our Civil Engineer 2, recently took a position in Frankfurt with the Division of Water. Luckily, we had somebody in-house that we could move into that position that was qualified. I'm pleased tonight to recommend Mr. Chad Doty for this promotion. Chad, if you would, please stand. Chad is a licensed professional engineer and received his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from WKU in 2007. He's been an employee of the city since 2016 when he began work as an Environmental Compliance Coordinator. Chad's new position will build on his existing skills as a stormwater professional. He will continue to assist in evaluating development plans in terms of water quantity and water quality, while at the same time transitioning into various other permits, development and private permits alike for the city. Additionally, Chad will lead our planning and design's traffic and transportation section. This work includes signage, striping, pavement markings based upon city-adopted standards, and as detailed in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, we call it the MUTCD. His primary focus will be on safety, capacity, and functionality of our various transportation systems. Chad is joined tonight by his wife, Marlena. And Chad and his wife reside in Butler County. They have 4 children, ranging from age, and probably raging too, from age 3 to 10. So, Chad, thank you. As in the case with other career path promotions in the city and other departments, Chad's promotion creates a vacancy in his current position, which is the Environmental Compliance Coordinator. For that position, we've chosen Mr. Nick Lawhon. Again, located in our Environmental Compliance Division, the Compliance Coordinator is responsible for reviewing all construction permits, applications for compliance with, again, local, state, and federal standards regarding water quality. Further, this position organizes the collection and utilization of data to determine both surface and subsurface flow characteristics for the implementation of development policies citywide. Nick will also interact, of course, with the public and the regulated community through reporting and compliance documentation for our various environmental permits that we have in the city. In support of the duties of the Compliance Coordinator, Nick recently achieved the certification as a Certified Floodplain Manager. He's a registered professional geologist, state of Kentucky, and he graduated Western Kentucky University with a bachelor's degree in geography with an emphasis on environmental planning, and has his master's degree in physical geoscience. Nick spent 5 years at the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources in the Division of Mine Permits before joining the city earlier this year. Nick and his wife Hope are expecting their first child sometime later this month, as a matter of fact. So it's my pleasure today to recommend both Chad Doty and Nick Lawhon for these promotions. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Comments or questions?
Thanks, guys.
Call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Congratulations, guys. Appreciate it.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
he said that Chad was gonna be in charge of the yellow lines, painting of yellow lines and so?
Only on Eastwood, I believe.
I'll have a few suggestions for you.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate your work. Municipal Order 2019-185.
Municipal order approving the probationary appointment of Justin Vincent to the position of Parks Facility Maintainer in the Cemetery Division of the Parks and Recreation Department.
Second?
By Nash, second by Beasley Brown. Mr. Mizel?
There's a department that we have looking for a person, and that department was NCS, and they decided to go down to Parks and raid the Parks Department and hire a gentleman by the name of Joe Schmidt for a code enforcement inspector job. So now Parks is looking to hire a Parks facility maintainer for the Cemetery Division, and I'm going to let Aaron Halsey come up and make the recommendation for appointment to this position.
Appreciate you trying to hold down the competition between the departments. Thank you, sir.
It gets ugly around here, so.
I generally like to put a more positive spin on these types of promotions and transitions, on how great career pathing we have here with the city of Bowling Green, that someone can be hired with the Parks Department and move on to NCS. But anyway, this is, but this is one of the appointments that I really like, because the vacancy is actually, I'm recommending to be filled by Justin Vincent. And Justin, if you can stand And the reason I like this is because Justin has actually been working with us since March of 2019 in the cemetery division as a seasonal part-time capacity. And there's no better job interview, I think, than one in which you work for your future employer for 6 months first. So we have been extremely impressed with Justin's performance and his commitment to the cemetery and are very pleased to offer him this full-time appointment. I'll be available if you have any questions.
Comments or questions? Call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, congratulations. We look forward to your continued service. Municipal Order 2019-186.
Municipal order approving the reappointments of Chuck Glass and Cardine Harrison and appointments of Julio Cabcabwe and Destiny O'Rourke to the Workforce Recruitment and Outreach Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perigin, second by Denning. These are reappointments of two who started with the organization, Chuck Glass and Cardine Harrison, whom both of you know. Julio was recommended by our international liaison, Leda Becker, and Destiny O'Rourke I recruited from Bowling Green High's Career Academy, hopefully to get a pathway for those students as well to come to work for us, if that's okay with you, Joe, at Bowling Green High.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all
Well, no doubt about it.
Comments or questions?
Everybody wants to be a purple.
Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-187.
Municipal order authorizing the purchase of Titleist golf products for Crosswinds, Paul Walker, and Riverview golf courses through non-competitive negotiations with Titleist of Chicago, Illinois, in an amount not to exceed $80,000.
So moved.
Second.
Perigin, second by Nash.
Our Parks Department, in particular our golf division, has merchandise that they sell at the pro shops, mainly Crosswinds and Paul Walker, some at Hobson. But our main seller is golf balls. People need golf balls to play golf, and Titleist is the best seller. I wasn't aware of it, but Titleist also makes Pinnacle. And so those are our two best sellers, and we are in need of purchasing more inventory. And given this is over the $50,000 limit, and given its non-competitive negotiation, we're bringing this to you for approval tonight in the amount of $80,000 for a new purchase of golf balls for golf division.
Comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-188.
Municipal order authorizing and accepting negotiations after sealed bidding for bid number 2020-08 for construction of a new fire station from Weir Constructors Incorporated of Bowling Green, Kentucky, in the total amount of $3,999,770.
Motion by Nash, second by Denning. Mr. Mizel.
We bid this out back in August, and there's actually three pieces to this bid. One is the fire station, of course, but then there's a parking lot addition that we're going to make to the park, as well as some improvements to the entrance to the park with traffic flow. And so we went out for bid. Those bids came in over budget back in August. We went back to the table and worked with the three bidders, Weir, Sunbelt, and Scott Murphy and Daniel, to try to get the amount or the cost down. Those have come back in again and are before you tonight. And total bid of the $3,999,000 for all three pieces. We are recommending to go with Weir Constructors. There was some misinformation kind of floating around in the media that I overheard a day or two ago, in that we only had $3 million budgeted for this project, and we're $1 million short of budget. That is incorrect, in that we are using land acquisition budget that we got free land. Of course, it was inside the park. We've also acquired free land at the Trans Park that was in the fire improvement budget, and so we have transferred that money to this project and are within budget after that transfer of the land money that we did not use. So Chief Colson is here tonight to answer any and all questions you have on this project involving the Lovers Lane fire station. Brent Belcher is also here if you have any questions on the parking lot or the entrance and so forth. So I'll let you all, Chief Colson, if you want to step up, maybe.
Chief Colson. With regard to that, that might have originated with me, because I thought $3 million is what we were talking about. But I understand that that was the basis for the building where we started, and we were using the figures from the 2008 Greenwood Station. Is that
Yes, I
correct?
forgot to mention that. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, that would have been me that got that.
Well,
going there, so.
we started with a $250 per square foot amount for our to base our budget on, which was 11 years ago, and market is a lot different, to say the least, now. Jason, you got any more?
No, we initially planned 12,000 square foot station, 3 bays, and budgeted based at $250 a square foot to get to our original 3 million, like you mentioned. So
Down from 12,000 square foot to,
10,642 total square foot, which is including living space, bay, storage, and covered space. So 10,642 square foot, which would put us at right at $361 a square foot.
Including the mezzanine as well,
That's
right?
including, upstairs mezzanine, which is 825 square foot of storage space as well.
so what did you do to reduce the size of the building?
Quite simply, we originally started with 3 bays, 3 full-depth drive-through bays. We met with the committee. We utilized a committee to determine our needs. We went back to the committee and determined that the third bay was essentially extra storage space. We determined that we could build storage space much cheaper elsewhere if we need that in the future. Again, trying to plan for growth in that area. We want this to be a 50 to 75 year fire station, so it's hard to envision what that area looks like. So the third bay was essentially for growth. But after those conversations, we decided to eliminate the third bay. So now it's a 2-bay fire station, which reduced that nearly $500,000.
376 to 360.
Okay.
Correct.
I don't have the square footage.
think that-
Basically, it took the original bid from 4.314 down to 3.843 after the change, so.
Tell me, have you checked with other fire stations around? 'Cause
Yes, I've talked to several that were built in recently. Columbia, Tennessee, they are building a 3-bay fire station. It is a 2-story, which you commonly can go up cheaper than you can go out, is what we discovered, but it's $335 a square foot. Franklin, Tennessee is building a 3-bay station. That's $385 a square foot. Elizabethtown's 326. Is a 2.5-bay station with a little bit smaller living space. So, anywhere from 3 to 385 seems to be the range for fire stations that have been built in the last year.
By this one contractor, or are they
No,
different
those are
contractors?
multiple contractors. 2 of those are our contractor. One of them is a contractor out of Owensboro, and then other comparisons are from Brandstetter Carroll, another architect that worked with 2 departments on other projects as well.
I know you've been looking up the stuff because of the questions I'm asking. I appreciate that. I don't want y'all to be in a pole barn out there. That's not the plan. It's just an outrageous amount of money per square foot for me. That's a tough one.
Understanding we do have, I believe, roughly $150,000 in contingencies as well for inspection, testing, unforeseen rock, those types of things. So we do have some money, hopefully that we won't have to utilize for those things, but.
Oh, I have a question, if that's okay. So we recently put out for bid a storage, kind of evidence storage for the for the police department. That's going to be built down here on land that we did own already. And that was what, 220 a square foot?
175.
175. So I just kind of want to understand a little bit better. And I know you can't speak for that particular bid and everything that goes into it, but intuitively, why would you think this would be that much more?
I think there are several things that come to mind when you ask that question. One is this is also, living space, so it comes with, the requirements for, plumbing, bathroom, more heat and air. Also, we have to have some safe space for severe weather because it is occupied. It is also sprinklered. It has to be sprinklered. There are lots of other requirements compared to fire station as compared to a storage facility. So, and just the general construction type in itself is a metal exterior with, I think, a brick veneer is what that is. This is a lot of masonry, a lot of stone, those types of things.
I have some questions. Chief, when I look at the bid tabulation summaries from August 21st of 2019 to the most recent of October 23rd of 2019, it appears that the parking lot construction for all three bidders increased?
Yes.
And that the drive entrance improvements for all three bidders increased, but all three bidders decreased on the construction of the fire station. I've spent a lifetime in social services, so I don't know the first thing about parking lot construction or drive entrance improvements, but I would assume that those are kind of constant costs, that building a driveway today is the same as building a driveway within a few months of one another. And so why would pouring of concrete or asphalt or base or any of that change from, with our successful bidder, from $52,000 to $68,000 when we went back to them to negotiate the bid lower?
Yeah, specific incident here, it usually doesn't happen like this. But from what I understood, after the first round of bidding and the negotiations took place, there was something that the contractors missed, the asphalt paving contractors. Because of the heavy trucks, the fire trucks, we required a heavier grade of asphalt binder that goes in the mix for the asphalt. And so it went from what we call, the standard mix is a 64-22, and the more beefed up is a 76-22. So what it does, it withstands better, heavier traffic better. And so the portion of the driveway, particularly from the fire station out to Lover's Lane, they re-looked at their bid. In other words, they didn't account for that in the first bid. I think it came up because of a differential and two different paving contractors that bid, and that's why it came to light. So all three, I think, adjusted their bid in order to account for that beefier asphalt mix. I hope that answers it.
It does on the entrance. Explain to me on the parking lot construction, are the trucks, I don't know where the parking lot is going to be in relation to the building, and maybe the fire trucks are going to drive over that, and so it accounts for that too. Generally, I like to see if we go back to negotiate a bid, we go down in all areas and not go up in two areas and come down in one.
And so, I can't say about the parking area, it's not the additional asphalt quality type, so I can't say why they did that, unless they missed something, they miscalculated the square yardage figure, because it's kind of a lump sum bid, and so that's all I can assume. I do know about the paving portion in the front for the extra lane, and it's an entire extra lane plus the surfacing of the other.
If we would have accepted the bid from August 21st, what would have happened?
They would have built it as bid.
And then who would have been responsible for the crumbling of the asphalt because it wasn't built to withstand the weight of the fire trucks?
Well, it would have been our responsibility to make sure they met the specifications of the bid, so they would have probably had to eat that cost proverbially.
So it was in our specifications?
It was in our specifications up front. They missed it the first time. Okay. So that's what I understand.
I would rather spend more money on a firehouse than I would on a parking lot. I mean, people have to live in it, and the people that have to live in it have to go out and do a difficult job when they're called upon to do it. And that just seems more important to me. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon the city commission to always try to find the best price that we can for things. I don't typically want to quibble over whether or not we spend a little more money on where people live, especially people we have to count on to do a difficult job, as opposed to quibbling over a parking lot. I would like some more information. The drive entrance improvements make sense to me. If it's a weight issue and it's related to the asphalt, the parking lot doesn't. So if we're jumping from 52,000 to 68,000 on a parking lot construction when we went to renegotiate the bid lower, and we can get that back to, on the parking lot alone, we can get that back to 52, then there's a couple $1,000s in there that we can invest into not having a pole barn for the firefighters to sleep in. I don't know that we have the ability to go back and renegotiate that, but if we do, I'd at least like an explanation for why.
Did this all together for one company, and so from August to now, we're saving $434,000 total overall.
I see the savings.
So I don't know that we have the ability to go back again, or if we want to take the chance to go back again and rebid this a third time to get the parking lot back to where it was. I guess I'm kind of lost on what
Brent, did you have
what
something?
we're
I can just
wanting to do.
explain the location of the parking lot and the reason the parking lot was, the thought from the parking lot being included in the first place. The parking lot not directly associated with the firehouse, but obviously the firehouse lot of traffic at Lawyers Lane Soccer Complex to the point of on a regular Saturday, this is recreational play, we run out of parking spaces. So where the firehouse is actually going is what we consider an overflow parking lot. It's grass. That's where individuals typically have parked when they can't find another spot. The lot we're talking about now would actually pave near the disc golf course, close to what we call the playground field, directly across. So it is not directly related to the firehouse whatsoever. The firehouse, in my opinion, would probably not be used in this parking lot at all. So it's not part of that. It was strictly a site improvement, a chance to improve the ability for the users of the park to have additional parking spaces. That's it. That's the intent of the parking lot included.
Please hear me when I say I'm not opposed to the parking lot. Right. I think the parking lot is needed. The parking is overwhelming out there on certain days. My concern is that we asked for a bid and we got it back on August 21st, and we had a parking lot being built for $52,765. We went back to renegotiate the bid, and we ended up with a parking lot that cost $68,010. And that $16,000 difference, I haven't heard why.
I won't be able to provide you.
Nobody seems to
I
know.
won't be able to provide you. Well, I can tell you that it's roughly 50 spaces, if I'm not mistaken.
It is like 52 spaces.
Yeah, it's 50. It's right at 50 spaces. The parking lot, 4 lines, I guess, 4 rows of parking, and that's roughly all I can tell you about the parking lot.
I mean, again, it's, I guess the second bid, you know, the original 3 contractors that we asked to bid again went back to their subcontractors and said, hey, we're rebidding this, you know, give us your price again. So it's a total rebid situation, whether that's good or bad, I guess, in what we got. It is part of that bid. So it's not that we negotiated the existing bid and it went up in negotiations. It's that it went up with a rebid. So,
Can we ask them why?
yeah, sure, we can ask them why. Yeah, but I mean, it's a bid, so it's a kind of take it or leave it since it was included. It was not an alternate, so it's with that package, I guess. So I'm not sure why it went up, Slim. I don't know.
And that's what I'm looking for.
I can ask, though.
If I, you know, I always have to put things in simple terms so I can understand them. If I went to Kroger at noon and I bought a gallon of milk for $1.29, and I went back at 5 p.m. and it cost me $2.59, I'm probably going to ask somebody, what happened? I mean, and they might say, hey, our truck broke down. You either want it or you don't. And I might take the milk at 5 p.m. at $1 more.
Right.
I might not, but I would at least want to know why, and especially when we're talking about spending, it's not $1 and change, it's $16,000 that we're cutting something out of the firehouse, correct, in order to get it down?
Not necessarily. These were, these were individual, we had them bid each individual component of this project. But we made the adjustments to the firehouse that were satisfactory, or the things that we needed to adjust, and send that back out for a request for bids based off the changes. There were no changes made to any other components of this bid package. So we don't have an explanation as to why the price went up on those components, other than they reevaluated and perhaps missed something originally, or the truck broke down. I'm not sure. But those are the numbers that we received back. We didn't call to, or at least my focus was the fire station.
I get it.
But we asked the questions, had some explanation as to why the drive entrance increased, but not specifically the parking lot. So.
I'm not going to vote against the firehouse under these conditions, but I'm troubled that we don't have an answer to that. I don't have any other questions.
Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning. Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-189.
Municipal order authorizing a contract through non-competitive negotiations with Vaughn and Melton Consulting Engineers Incorporated of Lexington, Kentucky for downtown streetscape improvements Phase 2 in the amount of $264,972.
So moved.
Motion by Perigin, second by Nash.
I'm going to make the assumption that we are all pleased with what's come about at Fountain Square thus far. I think it looks really good. The designers for that are who we are proposing tonight to go forward with Phase 2, Vaughn and Melton. And we have money in the FY19 budget that you all approved for design of Phase 2 that would cover this sole source proposal before you tonight. And what this includes would be an extension of design from Main Street going towards 6th Avenue down State and College, of the streetscaping that we have put in so far around Fountain Square. Along with that, we would also be asking them to design some streetscaping up Main and down Main from State Street to Chestnut and from College Street to Center Street. And so we have negotiated this amount, $264,972. We have all that and more in our budget for FY19 for design of this project, and we're bringing this to you tonight and asking for your approval to continue with the downtown improvements and get Phase 2 designed and ready for a construction bid as soon as we can. If you have any questions, I think Greg Meredith worked on this and can answer any of your questions, along with Brent and Katie as well. Sorry.
Are there any comments or questions in this essentially 7-block length, 7.5 blocks?
A question? So I'm excited to see that we're going to continue to build with the goal of having complete streets downtown. And I do see the diagram or the map here where we're going to add additional features to these streets to make it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. So would you be able to describe to me the features that we're adding and where we're adding it, and maybe go over what the complete streets are, again, the goal of that?
Sure. And I really second Jeff's opinion of of how downtown's looking is looking great. And so that's the theme that we want to continue on with this improvement, with this phase two. And so part of that, again, the complete streets are vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Just today, I think, as a matter of fact, they striped some of the bicycle lanes downtown. Even though it's a short section, it's our intent to build on that, to make the connections both up the hill and down toward the river for bicyclists. Of course, the pedestrian improvements are just sidewalks that are ADA friendly, that are, handicap accessible, that all of our citizens can enjoy and use Fountain Square Park with all of our amenities downtown. And so with that, the term complete streets was coined several years ago. It's just all-inclusive, transportation, thinking of transportation in different ways. It's not just the car anymore, and it hasn't been. So with that, that's what we call complete streets. Complete streets are the wave of the future, where more people are living downtown, more people want to be able to have options as far as transportation goes. And I think this is just a great starting point. I will also like to put a plug in for our downtown ribbon cutting. We've set that date for December the 3rd at 3 p.m. Hope anybody that's interested will come out and celebrate with us. And, way before I got with the city, the committee that was put together that did such a fantastic job of visualizing what downtown could be and what it could look like. So with that.
Thank you all for all of your hard work downtown. It's really exciting to start seeing it all come together, so thank you all. And do you have any timeline in terms of the project that we were doing with WKU to extend the bike lane up to campus? Do we know where we are?
Wish I did. No,
Okay.
That's been going on for about 10 years now. Nick was here earlier. Nick may have more information. The contract was actually bid out, and WKU is handling that. A portion of the completed project, I think it was called the Western Kentucky University Bikeway originally was the name. And so a portion that's on campus is already complete. And it's the portion down Center Street, across 8th Street, and on down to Parks and Rec that's kind of being held up. A multitude of reasons why. Right away took a couple of years. Environmental took a couple of years. Then the bids came in a little different than what the original grant was. They had to go back for that. And so I'm not really sure right now what the issue is. But it's been a long process, and Western's heading that up. So they would probably know more than we would. So, but it's in the works.
Thank you.
Oh, an update.
Try to put it on.
Bids are out, I believe. The pre-bid is scheduled, and again, this is through Western. We're just kind of supporting, a pre-bid mandatory conference is November 14th. So the bids should come in that next week. I believe that might be the 21st. So fingers crossed we have an awardable project and we can get moving on that with no snags. Again, Greg explained the snags are at the state for various reasons because of the grant process. But we hope to have something that you can see happening here soon. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Is our hope for State and College Street based on the red lines? Are we planning on putting 200 or 300 trees that block traffic and so on?
No, I don't think we don't want to do that. Obviously, if you've seen the new portion downtown around Fountain Square, there are these curbed islands we call bump outs that also have planters in them. And so, there are going to be some trees downtown. They should be oriented in such a way that don't block traffic, but, help create that inviting pedestrian streetscape, but also help, encourage cars not to drive quite so fast. So that's the purpose of the bump outs, and to give you the kind of the neighborhood feel, kind of the slow down, feel, if you will. So, no, it's not to block traffic. It's not to put trees that are inappropriate for that kind of setting. So there'll be street trees. They'll be smaller than some of the trees that were downtown previously along the roadways that kind of did get in the way. So that's not our intent at all, no. And so for some of the red lines, some of those red lines, if you look at Exhibit A, there's some yellow lines as well. Those yellow lines are where some of the sidewalk has been replaced already with like Circus Square development, Sky Pack, around the View, So some of those sidewalks are new, and we don't plan on, unless there's a grade issue or an issue with traffic, we don't plan on taking those sidewalks out. We're just gonna enhance those areas to make, again, to allow for the bicycle lane, to allow for traffic calming measures to be put in. We're also gonna look at the intersection of State Street and 7th Street there beside, I guess, Hickory and Oak and the View, about some traffic issues there that we may make better. And again, it's all about the interaction of different modes of transportation, making them safer, more efficient, and more inviting for the folks that live downtown.
Comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning. Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, Municipal Order 2019-190.
Municipal order accepting the City of Bowling Green, Kentucky Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the period ended June 30th, 2019, as prepared by the Department of Finance and audited by Mountjoy Chilton Medley CPAs and Advisors LLP.
So moved.
Motion by Beasley Brown, second by Nash. Mr. Mizel.
First of all, I'd like to point out that it's November 5th, and we've got this on your agenda, and I'd like to thank Katie, Sean, and Aaron, and finance, all the finance staff for pushing through this, getting this CAFR ready to go and audit complete. But I also like to thank Deborah Jenkins for getting this on the audit committee agenda so early in the year and getting it done. So tonight, we have Jeff Stein, chairman of our audit committee, with us. And Jeff, would you like to come up and make your comments and answer any questions the board may have on this item?
I don't know how many questions I can really answer that would expand upon the auditor's communication is a new feature that we've got in the packet this year. I think I wanted it included. I thought it did a good job, hitting the high points. I think the gist of it is that our financial controls in the city are in good shape. I will note pages 7 and 8, no financial misstatements, nothing unusual was discovered. No material weaknesses. Basically, it's a clean report. No fraud, no illegal acts. I think page 15 also indicates there were no difficulties in performing the audit, no disagreements with management. Everything was really clean and smooth, best I could tell from the report. So that's all I've got. On behalf of the audit committee, we're recommending approval.
The audit committee is composed of outside business and accounting professionals who take a separate set of eyes outside of the city to look at what we have, and it's your
Correct, yes.
presentation that you're satisfied and comfortable with how the city operates financially. I like to hear that, even if I say it. Any comments or questions?
Too, because I sit on the audit committee.
Mhm.
Deborah and Katie and others, and I'm sorry, finance department. They have one job, and they know what it is. And I asked those specific questions pertaining to the audit, and I am pleased that we had no problems. We don't want any problems. Thank you, Mayor.
Comments?
If I may, I just wanted to echo what the city manager has already stated, but to give credit to our ACFO, Erin Ballou. She puts an inordinate amount of time in putting this document together. And also our ACFO, Sean Weeks, works on this document. I proof it multiple times, but they do most of the work with it, along with the rest of our finance department. So I want to give them credit for this document.
You stole my question. And my question was, I wanted to ask the city manager if he believes that the current CFO is doing a better job than the previous CFO by getting this on the agenda so quickly.
Apparently, she cracks the whip better than I do.
Well, I definitely want to thank everyone involved in the audit. It's an odd thing to say, but it was a pleasure to read through the audit. I found that the complex things were explained, I think, in a way that anyone can read it and feel like they would understand, took the time to define things and talk through all the different points. And reading through it, you realize what the breadth of scope of our finance department and all the things that they hold together, and to make sure that those do have the controls that they need to make sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. It's a huge job, and you all not only do it really well, but the fact that you make that accessible to the public in a way that they can read it and feel like they can really do that job of holding our government accountable, and that we're being transparent is important. So thank you for making this type of information accessible. And so then my one question is, how do citizens access this audit once it's published?
We will have it posted on our website, and we also have to submit it to the state. So we will get that done probably in the next couple of weeks and make sure it is posted to the website. We want to make sure there aren't any other potential typos or formatting issues before we do post it. But that will be accessible to the public from our website. And of course, they can always contact our office, and we can provide copy. We would do that at 10 cents a page if they actually want a copy of the document. And it's 187 pages, so it might be better if they want to access it through the website. We will also be preparing in the next couple of weeks before the city holiday open house. We should have a popular annual financial report, which is a much more condensed version of our annual audit. So it again makes it much more user-friendly and more accessible for the public, and it's about a 6 to 10 page document versus 187 pages. So we really try to condense it down and hit the really high points and the most important pieces, and share that also with the public.
Other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Stein. We appreciate it.
If I may, Aaron just happened to walk in the room, and we just finished the document. Did you have any additional questions for Aaron, if any?
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks for stopping.
Thank you.
We just finished, so, sorry, Aaron.
We already bragged on you.
First reading of ordinance BG 2019-47.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning tracts of land containing 1.1140 acre from RM2 two-family residential to GB general business located at 0, 1024, 1028, and 1032 Kenton Street, and 1023, 1027, 1031, and 1033 Greenwood Alley, presently owned by CSR BG Investments LLC, care of Chris Robertson.
So moved.
Motion by Perigin, second by me. This is a first reading of a unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning. With regard to this, I think there's some questions. If you'd like to come up, Mr. Peterson. Joe, you want to go first, right?
Thank you. Give me the background on what we planned for this particular block of Kenton Street. What is the intent of the owner?
This particular thing that's presented to you tonight would be to tear down the existing homes and construct contractor garages, which would be individual units that you could rent if, say, you were a landscape contractor or a plumber or something like that, be able to store your things and have an office there rather than maybe at your home or somewhere else. It would be a smaller space.
How many?
I'm not sure if they know how many they're doing at this particular time, but the preliminary development plan showed 3 structures. One was a 1,500 square foot structure. One would be a 7,500 square foot structure, and the other one would be right at a 2,500 square foot structure. So as presented, that was three separate buildings, and then they would be divided up into different units.
I used to live right at 11th and Kenton Street. front door faces the school. I am concerned with this type of construction across from 11th Street Church. Now, I want to thank the person whoever Mr. Robertson is for buying the property, because it needed to be bought and major work done to each one of those houses. So I thank him for buying those dilapidated houses. But I just have some concern with this type of construction being in a residential area and close vicinity to one of our major churches in the city of Bowling Green. That's where I stand right now on the first reading. Thank you, Mayor.
I have a question. Would you mind going through, I guess it's page 4 of 27 of your staff report? It's going through the Focus 2030 category review. I've never seen a project have this many, or actually I don't think I've ever seen one that had one of these points that says it does not comply. So there's several that the staff identified as not complying and some that may not. So if, and some of these I've never seen before. So if you could sort of talk about the comprehensive 2030 plan and what these determine. 4 of 27.
So before I begin and go through those, so what that is, those are goals, objectives, and action items that are evaluated anytime there's any rezoning request. And so those of what's been adopted by all the legislative bodies in the county, including this one at some point. And then anytime we get a proposal in, we evaluate it based on those things, whether they comply or not comply, or it's up to the Planning Commission to make that determination. So that's kind of the three general things that we note through the staff report. I will say that at the time we wrote the staff report, they did not respond to staff. So when we get their proposal in, we do a draft of the staff report, and then we send them the things that we think, hey, you still need to address those things, or these are the items that weren't fully addressed. And then they did not respond to our email there. That typically happens within 2 weeks prior to the Planning Commission meeting, and then they have a week to respond to that. So some of these they did not comply because they didn't address those before, at the time we wrote the staff report. And then the night of the staff report, we ended up with a separate set of the development plan conditions, formerly binding elements, that did address some of those. So the staff report may not exactly coincide with what was actually submitted that night, because that would have been new information. So we'd have to go to the record, the minutes and the video record to do that. So that's worth noting. So these are organized into two types of tests. So the first thing that the staff looks at is the category review. So what does the future land use map show that that could be, and then what are the zones that could be compatible with? It doesn't match that. In this particular case, it met those things. And then we go to those individual items and then look at those and comment on those. So is it compatible with the area? Is it designed to preserve the character of the area? There's some dealing with the natural features like trees, the historic nature of the homes, the access points. We looked at Kenton and Greenwood Alley. We look at the infill. Is it appropriate infill for the area? And so many of those items are left up to the planning commission to decide. Kind of, does it fit? Is it in character? Is it compatible? The ones that are an easy or yes or no, we note that, like the trees. So they didn't commit to preserve the trees. Well, since they didn't make that commitment on the front end, then they didn't comply with that. So when you see all of those, and there's 21 items there, I won't go through all of them unless you really want me to, but that's how we do that. And then once we go through the entire staff report, then that's when we do those points to consider on the first page of that staff report. And then the Planning Commission, I think I've said this before, but I'll remind you. So they look at their decisions in three parts. The first part is the application. What is the applicant asking for? The second part is the staff report. What are we providing? What items are applicable to this, and what they meet and what they don't? And then the third part is public testimony. And so at the end of the day, they look at all three of those things, put whatever weight they think are applicable for them personally on that, on those three things, and then they vote and make their decision in form of recommendation to you. So it's probably the long way and not the direct answer, but.
One question.
Yes, sir.
How does this property or the proposal comply with existing areas around it? Now, we had a situation here the last meeting, maybe some may not, that was on a busy road and so on, but it was at the end of the road. I'm just confused how this complies with what already exists.
So let me preface this by saying that ultimately the decision is this body's and not the Planning Commission. What they give you is a recommendation. So all I can say is, and maybe the best one to look at is the future land use map, which is page 9 of 27, and that's our 9, not your 9. You probably have about 1,000 pages tonight, but of different things. But if you look at that future land use map, and if you can see the US 31W bypass going through the middle of that, it's labeled, then you can see that purple color there, that's commercial. That's just what you know on the bypass, that commercial. Then you see that brown color, and then this property's highlighted right in the middle in red. So that's mixed-use residential. So that indicates that it could be residential of any form, single-family, multifamily, but it also allows for some commercial too. And then as you go back away from the bypass, you see less intense residential. It's strictly residential there, that kind of peach color. So when you look at that, and you look at that brown color, so what the applicant has to prove is that they are compatible with the area. So all I can tell you is that the Planning Commission, based on what they were wanting to do, what they said they wanted to do, and the development plans that conditions that they submitted, along with their layout, their proposed layout, which is drawn up on page, looks like 11 of 27. That's the layout where they propose to put the buildings and the parking and the landscaping. Based on all of that, the Planning Commission felt like it was compatible and made that positive recommendation to you. Compatibility can be achieved by a number of different things, through design, through buffering, through landscaping, and so that is what you have before you tonight, is that positive recommendation.
Just to clarify on his question, so the compatibility that you were mentioning earlier was with future land use, the existing. The reason why they have to request this is because it does not, what they want to build does not comply with the existing zone, correct?
Correct. So the existing zone was the RM2, which is multifamily zone. Since they wanted to do commercial, that's why they asked for general business. So they were changing it from a residential character to a business character.
And that's what gives us the opportunity to, I guess, decide if that's appropriate or not.
Correct. Burden of proof is the applicants to prove that they have done enough to fit in.
piggyback on a question you had. So she asked about the non-compliance or does not comply, and you said that questions were submitted to the developer and the developer did not respond. Why did the item ever go on the agenda if the developer had not responded?
When we have a complete application which meets the minimum requirements, we will take that application. So it met, they supplied the layout, they supplied development plan conditions. But what they didn't respond back to us was, hey, you may want to think about these additional things. Now, they did eventually that night, but just not the time of the authoring of the staff report.
And so is there a mandate? And who sets that mandate that all questions haven't been answered, but we're still going to put it on the agenda?
So that, if it's a technically complete application, I feel it is my responsibility to take that application because the burden of proof is on the applicant. Now, that is why we started providing some of our correspondence in that staff report, some of those last few pages, so they can see the evolution of that project. But we will, if the application is technically complete, we will take that application before the Planning Commission, since we are not the decision makers.
What motivation would a developer have in responding to the questions if they know that the item's going to go on the agenda anyway?
To hopefully, the theory, I guess, is that it would have they would have a much stronger case and they would have addressed more of the items as presented. But I think what happens, you know, we're busy, we're all busy, we're fortunate to have a lot of development going on. So sometimes we don't get those back in time when we send out that staff report, and those sometimes try to get answered on the floor that night at the public hearing, and sometimes that creates confusion.
And that's what I'm driving at, is that if our system in and of itself is creating confusion, then I think we should be doing something different. And that is, because if I'm a developer and I'm concerned that I don't really want to answer these questions because answering these questions or working on them is not in my favor to do so, then I would rather argue them from the floor. Maybe there'll be confusion, maybe there won't. Maybe I'll be the last item on the agenda and fatigue will have set in. Maybe there will have been an item right before mine which went a particular way, so now everybody feels like, oh, we did our one mandatory, obligatory thing there, and we're going to go a different direction now. I would, any item that's placed on the city commission agenda, and we saw there was one item tonight that didn't have that, but I want to have all the information in order to make a clear decision and information in advance that I can think about. When do the planning commissioners get their packet?
Typically, at least, well, ideally a week before, but it depends on the mail.
So they would like to, the idea is that they would get it a week before so that they can digest the information and they're not making a decision the night that they have to make the decision.
Yeah, but what I can't do is substitute my opinion for what the planning commissioner's decision may or may not be. So we called it a system. I do not believe the system is broken. I think the system works better now. Of course, I'm biased, but better now than it has been in recent history. But the system is only as good as its input and its components. So we try our best as staff to get all of those things resolved, but if they don't, they still have the legal right to input their stuff into the system.
Some other questions that I have is, all of the properties surrounding this, bordering it, are single family, correct?
Correct. For the most part, yes.
Okay. It's stated in the notes that the gentleman who's developing the property, and I like Mr. Denning, I'm glad that he's doing so. We want more development in Bowling Green, not less. We want smart development in Bowling Green as opposed to just development, though. It says in the staff report that there is, that the gentleman owns at least half of the properties that are on the block. And I wonder, why is that relevant?
So The relevance of that is, rather than one spot or one parcel being developed, is a little bit different of a character than a half a block or a whole block. So if you were going to do a whole block, maybe that's different than a half a block, which is different than one parcel. So it's in that guise.
So it's not to imply that if you have more money and you can own more properties, that you're more likely to get your zoning request approved?
I wouldn't know.
Okay. A gentleman spoke about that he also owned the majority of the other properties, and he was opposed. He talked about there being cut-through issues. He talked about that, and the property owner's attorney said that's up to the transportation cabinet. What will happen related to access to the 1130 High Street, or not to 1130 High Street, that's where the gentleman lives, but to the other properties? Will there be restriction access problems that they run into?
Oh, in this particular block, and the aerial on 6 of 27 of the staff report may show that, but there is no alley currently through there. Greenwood Alley has the alley name on it, but functions kind of as a street, but Kenton Street is there. So there is no cut-through, access restricted, or anything like that to the other properties.
One of the questions that was raised, and a concession that was made, is that there will be no automobile repair, body shop, or mechanical work permitted on the premises. If this were approved, who enforces that?
Since it became a development plan condition, then we do.
And do you have staff that routinely goes out and monitors properties to ensure that they are in compliance with that?
Typically by complaint only, but when we get those complaints, we do respond. We do have a full-time staff member that does that.
But it would only be if this property were approved in 5 years from now, people have moved and this majority of properties have changed hands and people don't know that there can't be automotive there, there's nobody out actually policing that. So the
Correct, no.
concession and the agreement is only as good as the citizen who lives next door having to police it, as opposed to the entity that actually approved for it to be there?
Yes, but I would submit that it works better than you're maybe implying.
Okay. But it's accurate, that it is incumbent upon the citizen
Really accurate,
to
yes.
enforce it.
The same as basically nuisance and code enforcement.
Sure. A question was asked that was never answered of, will this commercial property in and amongst all other RM2 properties devalue those RM2 properties? Question was asked, it just wasn't answered. Is there an answer to that question?
We do not typically hear the property valuation conversation. I believe Mr. Moore
Cuts that off?
cuts that off,
Okay.
yes.
Is there a position that the planning and zoning takes on demolishing existing historic homes?
Only in the, no official position, except if it's in one of the historic overlays, which has the demolition protection in, and it has to go through that process first. Otherwise, it's just be in that analysis that was referenced earlier, where we identify if there are historic structures that either are on the National Register or locally designated, or could be. And so in this case, I think 4 of those could have been, so we noted that. So that was part of the consideration.
Thank you.
What were the houses could have been on the historic preservation list?
It's just could be listed, so that's pretty vague. And really what it is, if you look at the Secretary standards and the eligibility, potential eligibility for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, for example, one of them is just simply 50 years old or older. So that would qualify it on its own. Doesn't mean it's listed. It doesn't mean anybody's got an idea of putting it on there, it just means it could be, so it's just generally designated as a home that could have some historic value to it.
I don't have any more.
I do want to ask one question,
Sir.
Ben. The four people that spoke, none of them said they were against it. You're using the term expressed concern. Does that mean opposition, or it's a euphemism for opposition, or just asking questions about it?
Usually you just get one of two types, expressing concerns and just having questions, or there's opposition. I don't know that there was any real opposition to this. Maybe one or two of those would I classify as opposition, if that's the question. But
I guess what
but
I'm trying to find out is-
nobody rose their hand and said, I'm opposed to this, that I'm aware of.
If there is opposition, do you put that in the minutes?
Yes, so typically with every application, when there's people in the audience that have questions or otherwise, they will ask for, if there was any opposition, and ask for a show of hands.
I just want to make sure I understood what that term meant in your mind, so.
Where was the signage denoting the fact that something was going to change on these properties? Where was your signage?
I do not know exactly for this particular case. I don't have that in front of me. We do have that in our office, and we take pictures when we put them out, but we would have put one on both Kenton and Greenwood Alley, both typically somewhere close to the middle of the property to be rezoned. So there would have been two signs for this one minimum. Then we also mail letters directly to the property owners that are directly adjacent to all these properties, whether they touch or would touch if there was no street. And then we also take the additional step with our changes from about a year ago to mail it to all property residents within 200 feet of the boundary. And then we also, of course, put it in the newspaper.
And just to ask a follow-up question on that,
Mm-hmm.
you make them aware of the hearing, but say there was communication in the neighborhood that made them believe that this was going to be developed into housing, and so they felt that was a great thing, so they didn't come. Did your communication let them know that this had changed to a commercial garage?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how we could monitor that.
I just want to make sure
communication,
that they weren't made aware
Yeah.
that it was going to be commercial
yeah.
garages.
It's more of like,
Okay.
yeah, no, so if it's just interested, talks about the zone, and that's pretty much it. And if they're interested, sometimes the zone's descriptive, sometimes it's not, but it just makes them aware that there is a change proposed, and they can contact us. And then, of course, we put the full staff report and everything on the website at some point. So if they contact us, we give them whatever we have.
When the mayor asked about opposition, you described a process where the chairperson asked for a show of hands. I would assume that if that's done on every zoning, that would be reflected in the minutes. Because on that particular night, that was done on certain items and reflected in the minutes. It was not reflected in the minutes on this item if it occurred.
Well, there was, if I remember correctly, there was 4 people there, and none expressed opposition either. They all had various questions. In fact, one of them said they supported it at the end. So, it's not every single time they do that, but if there's a bigger group where they can't discern, they usually do. And then it's not always reflected in those summary minutes which you have,
Okay.
but it would be obviously on the official video record.
Thank you.
Ready to vote, please call the roll for the first
Beas-
reading.
Beasley Brown.
I vote to deny the proposed zoning map amendment based upon the testimony and documents presented.
It's not time for that, we have to vote no first.
Yeah, this is my no vote.
Okay, if we do, then we have to go through the other thing that you're talking about there.
So I can't explain my vote as I'm voting?
You can explain your vote, but I think when I'm hearing you, your vote probably on this ordinance before you may be a no. You can explain your vote, but there's not a.
That's all I'm
there's not
trying
an
to do is
ordinance- okay.
explain my vote as
Okay,
I
there's
vote.
not an ordinance before you right now to deny
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'm not trying to make a different, separate motion. This is explaining my no vote. So again, I vote to deny the proposed map amendment based upon the testimony and documents presented in the public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is not consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its noncompliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report as follows. 1, the proposal is not compatible with the area and does not comply with LU-1.1.3. 2, the proposal does not protect the nearby neighborhood and therefore does not comply with LU-2.5. 3, the proposal does not comply with LU-2.5.2 and HN-1.2 because the proposed infill development is not compatible with the surrounding area. 4, the proposal does not comply with NCR-2.5 nor NCR-2.5.3 as the applicant is proposing to demolish the historic homes located on the properties. 5, the proposal does not comply with HN-1 and HN-1.3 because the proposal is not a suitable infill project, nor will it maintain or improve the existing character and pattern of development within the area, nor strengthen the nearby neighborhood. 6, the proposal does not comply with HN-2.3 as the applicant plans to demolish the existing homes and is not building housing for low to moderate income families. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment, in my opinion, is not in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Denning.
I vote no, and my exact words are the same as Commissioner Beasley Brown.
Nash.
No.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
First reading is failed. Now you have to have the second.
But we still have to go forward with the second reading in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, between that and the next meeting, I'll go ahead and, based on the comments I've heard here, we can have a second ordinance on the agenda denying it, and we can then take a vote on that one.
Thank you. First reading of ordinance BG 2019-48.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning 2 tracts of land containing 0.35 acre from RM3 Townhouse Multifamily Residential to RM4 Multifamily Residential located at 0 and 1640 Curd Drive, presently owned by Fritz Real Estate Holdings LLC.
So moved.
Reading of unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning for apartments off of Cave Mill Road next to some apartments. Are there any comments or questions?
Sorry, I might be confused. Are we on Cave Mill or on Curd
I'm sorry,
Drive?
I apologize. We are incurred. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I flipped over one too many. Did
I have a
call out
couple-
48 or 49?
We're on number 9, and it's BG 2019-48. Curd Drive.
Right, again, this is another unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning for Curd Drive. And the motion still stands, Sue? Second by me. Any comments or questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
In the brief summary of the request, in a memorandum to the city commissioners from Jessica Martin dated October 7th, 2019 regarding 0 and 1640 Curd Drive. It indicates here that 3 different variances must be granted in order for this project to move forward. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell me, do you think it's fair to say a summary of the statutes related to planning and zoning and development? A summary of those would indicate that there needs to be a unique circumstance to request and therefore approve a variance. If that is accurate, what unique circumstance exists here to approve not 1, not 2, but 3 different variances on one piece of property?
But to answer the first part, yes, I think that's a fair generalization of the reasons in general to grant a variance. On page 5 of 34 of the staff report, you'll see the variance findings that are outlined by the KRS statute that is 100.243. I will not read that to you, but again, the burden of proof being on the applicant, they have to supply the reasons why, and then the planning commission in this case has to agree whether or not they meet those findings necessary to grant that variance. And that is a paragraph you'll see in italics there about 2/3 of the way down, where it talks about the comprehensive plan, the area's been designated as high density, the property being situated in a mixed-use area, and the BGMU substation, WKU practice field, so on and so forth. So that is the reasoning the applicant gave for those, requesting those variances, and the planning commission did grant those 3 variances.
You don't have any involvement in that, correct? That's a voting issue amongst the board.
So we have the same involvement in that as we do these zone changes. We do the analysis and give that same staff analysis, points to consider, and all of those things. So the variances in this case were heard in combination with the zone change proposal. So it was the total package that the planning commission considered.
Are there any other properties within that block that contain that many living units on one piece of property, or 2? Because this is actually a combination of 2 pieces of property. So if you took any 2 pieces of property in that block and combined them, would you come up with 8 units?
Do not believe so. Let's see, we look at that density as part of our staff analysis. Might take me a second to find it, but I do not believe so. So that's at the bottom of the page 2 of 34 of the staff report, where it says surrounding density, and continues on to the top of page 3. The registry, which is kind of on the edge of that area there, is the 23 dwelling units an acre. And the proposed here was right just under 23 dwelling units an acre. So that is the same density.
And that is a property that is up on Morgantown Road, and this is a property that is on the backside of the roads in question that come off Morgantown Road, travel, I think, 3 blocks before they get there. And so I get that there's a college or there is an apartment development within the area, but none within the block. And many of those single-family homes over there are people who moved in and who've hung on through the variation of changes in maintaining single-family residences. There is some rental in there, and I don't say that as if renters count less than do property owners, but there's just nothing like this within that block.
Correct. If you, that's basically the existing land use map. If you look on page 10 of 34, the property quote in question before you tonight's outlined in blue, and you can see the surrounding land uses. Yellow is the single-family residential. Green, of course, is western essentially there. And you see that one multifamily residential that is to the back of that. So the rest are all single-family until you get past Forest Drive.
No further questions.
I have a follow-up question about the variances. So on page 7 of 34, you provide for the commission if they're going to vote to approve a variance request, and then below it to deny. And in the motion to approve, I noticed that it doesn't include the language as to so in the variance findings in the KRS, it says, in making these findings, the board shall consider whether, and then it goes through the bulleted points of A, B, and C. That is missing from the approval, but it is in the language to deny. And I'm just curious as to why they don't have to approve when KRS says that they do, that it's because of these 3 reasons that they deserve to have this variance request?
So typically, this is the suggested motions as it states, but rather than repeat it twice, we just stick it in
So
there.
that's for
in one.
both, is at the bottom,
Yes,
essentially.
Technically, it's choose one or more of the appropriate. So the first part is to approve, just the first part, then the second part's just that first portion, and that bottom third, if you
both.
will, is choose those that you think apply.
So which of the A, B, and C applies?
I'm not sure that they made the findings that specific for this particular approval. So if you look at the KRS 100s, they, only things that they have to find is that first paragraph there, which is in number 1. The A, B, and C is shall consider. So you shall consider A, B, and C when you're trying to determine whether it meets the rest of that paragraph in 1.
I guess you'll have to define for me what consider means, if it doesn't mean to include that in your
Sure.
decision.
So, yeah, so it's just as simple as what you're doing tonight. You shall consider all of the things presented before you, and then you have to make a decision. It's basically, you just put in there and says, are there special circumstances what don't apply to other land in the same vicinity? That the strict application of the regulations would be too burdensome, or the circumstances or result of the applicant taken subsequent to the adoption of the zoning ordinance. It doesn't mean that all three has to apply. It could just be one. Or in the case of a board member, maybe they decide none of those apply, and I'm just looking at the first paragraph there, and that's all that matters. So it's really that board's decision at that point.
I guess for me, when I think about sort of the rules that govern how we live together, and making sure that, you know, when we set those rules, when we're buying property, deciding where to live, if we're deciding to have separate rules for someone else and that negatively impacts the other person, I do think that should be a high bar. If you're going to benefit from breaking a rule and your neighbor suffers from it, there should be a high bar if we ask a neighbor to do that. And it would be helpful for me in this position if, when the commission decides to approve a variance, if somewhere in their decision they can communicate to us why they felt like this person deserved to have a separate set of rules than everybody else.
So there's a couple things. One, I would say a variance, just as a point of clarification, is not allowing the breaking of a rule. It's granting relief from a certain portion of the zoning ordinance due to a set of conditions or situations presented on a piece of property that they may be appropriate given the overall situation. When they're combined with a zone change, then it's that total package. So compliance can be achieved through a number of different ways, through buffering, landscaping, and all those things we've discussed about with other applications. So again, all I can say is what you have before you tonight is the unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission to consider this. The variances have already been approved, and those, while we're part of this application, was a final decision by the Planning Commission because it was in conjunction with the zone change. But obviously, you can consider that in your overall decision.
And can you describe what the variance will mean for the neighbor? So how close will the property be on each one of those property edges since this variance was allowed?
Sure. So that's kind of on that first page of the staff report. They requested a variance of 5 feet from their rear setback of 10 to allow them to be only 5 feet from that property line. And then they, same thing for the side yard. And then they also obviously varied that landscaping buffer of 10 feet between. So basically it made 5 feet around those sides of the adjoining properties for both the landscaping and how close the building can be to the property line.
So the buffering will start 5 feet from the property line and will just be 5 feet of buffer, is what you're saying?
So if they put the building, and of course, the proposed preliminary development plan layout shows this, you'll see that didn't have the landscaping drawn on this one, but you can see that the building is proposed to be up against that rear property line from Southway, so that would be the north property line, and then only 5 feet from that east property line as well. They maintain the 25-foot front line off of Southway and off of Curd Drive, and then they will be required to provide in that 5 feet between the property line and the building, landscaping around both that north and that east property line, and honestly, around all property lines.
So these are two-story apartments, right?
Correct. Part of the development plan conditions limited it to 2 stories.
And the single-family homes next to it are one-story?
And generally, yes, I think the tallest, next tallest building around, if I remember correctly, was the church that is on down Curd Way. Let's see. Yeah, so if you look at the surrounding architectural features on page 3 of the staff report, the second paragraph there, the area was mainly comprised of 1 and 1.5 story single-family structures, with the exception of the registry, which we've already noted is a few more blocks away.
When you say the church is on Curd Way, isn't the church on Johnson Drive and has a ingress point on Curd Way?
Let me see. May be correct. There is a, yes, sir. It's on the other side of Curd, yes, off of Johnson, and has the, yes.
Actually, the 2-story structure that we're referencing is even further away and not even within the block, again, that we're talking about, that these residents have invested into over many years and hung on to live there.
It is also noted that there's an apartment on Forest Drive, which is the next street over. Where is it located?
Easiest way to just to see that, maybe page 10 of 34 of the staff report. Again, if you look at the existing land use, you can see those rows of apartments on Forest Drive there, that is the registry. So it's on the corner of, part of the registry, I believe, that's on the corner of Old Morgantown Road and Forest Drive. That one may have a different name, but it's essentially the same development.
We already have apartments there.
So RM3, the way it's already zoned, can be multifamily, correct? How big of a apartment complex could they build without having to rezone?
So that would be based on, I'm not sure I have that in front of me, but you have to have 8,000 square foot of lot space plus 2,000 square foot of each additional unit. I can do that math and figure that out, but I do not have that in front of me right now unless it's in our pre-app notes. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm just curious. I mean, I don't see any RM4 on this block. And if you can do multifamily, I just don't. And you're having to ask for all these variances to have a 2-story apartment building 5 feet from a single-family home. I'm not understanding the need for that.
Other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
No.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
No.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Ordinance, first reading of 2019-49.
Ordinance rezoning real estate. Ordinance rezoning tracts of land containing 11.24 acres from HB Highway Business and F floodplain to RM4 multifamily residential and F floodplain located at 0 Cave Mill Station Boulevard, presently owned by Cave Mill Station LLC, with Cave Mill 2 LLC as contract vendee.
Moved.
Second.
Perigin, unanimous recommendation from Planning and Zoning for apartments off of Cave Mill next to other apartments. Any comments or questions?
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019.
Municipal order approving an amendment to the grant agreement from Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet for Transportation Alternatives Program funds in the amount of $70,226.
So moved.
Second by Nash.
A while ago, the city received $177,000 from a TAP grant to fund the construction of a new greenway path behind Moss Middle School. We realized that was a little short of what we needed to get that project finished. And so Nick went out and found additional money. We've been awarded $70,226 from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet's TAP program again, and we're requesting that we accept this additional $70,226. I think that would get us to around $248,000 to go towards this project, which would connect an existing greenway on Creekwood Drive to behind Moss Middle School, which would be, I think this greenway would be about 1/4 of a mile and provide a safer route for the kids to get back and forth to school or ride their bike to school behind Moss. So I recommend acceptance of this $70,226.
Comments or questions?
I have one question. There were also going to be greenways to connect it to Jennings Creek, right, that the school was going to put in, and is it going to connect, or is that something totally different that I'm remembering?
The original project was to connect the greenway behind Moss Middle School, but during the design process, the decision was made to actually connect the greenway behind Jennings Creek Elementary School. So the greenway will actually stop just over Jennings Creek on the school property, and then the plan is the school will construct a sidewalk that will connect to the greenway from Jennings Creek Elementary, but then they will also construct a sidewalk that will connect over to Moss Middle School as well.
Okay, so it's both. That's great. Thank you.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-192.
Municipal order authorizing the acceptance of a grant through the Kentucky Fire Commission Training Facility Grant Program in the amount of $67,000 for the purchase of a fire vent training prop for the fire department.
So moved.
Second.
Brown, Mr. Mo.
Again, we are requesting permission to accept the grant from the Fire Commission Training Facility Grant Program for $67,000. There is no match required on this, and what we're going to use it for is a fire vent training prop that the fire department's going to use for training on recruiting classes on ventilation techniques, live fire exercises, all kinds of things like that. So recommend acceptance of this $67,000 for the fire department.
Answer questions. Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2019-193.
Municipal order approving revisions to the employee medical benefit plan for employees of the city of Bowling Green.
So moved.
Second.
Beasley Brown.
If you'll recall, we had a work session back on October 14th to kind of give you an overview of the proposed changes that we're making to our medical benefits plan. Those include changes to the plan premiums, adding a second medical plan that's a reference-based pricing plan based on Medicare reimbursement. Also making some changes to the prescription plan, copay structure. We're going to a 5-tier plan. We're adding some term limits and account minimum type limits to our HRA plan that some people may still have access to. And all these changes are being proposed to go into effect January 1st. Aaron Holsey is here to answer any questions you have on this. But basically, everything is in your packet. Aaron wrote a good memo summarizing these changes as well. And I'd like to thank Lori Gray for all her work as well on this. She's put together a lot of this information. There's a comparison page front and back in your packets that compares the existing PPO plan to what the new reference-based pricing plan would look like with your co-pays on all the different services that would be allowed. And then last page just kind of summarizes the HRA, how that plan would work. And I'm sorry, next to last, and then the last page kind of gives you a summary of the 5-tier prescription plan that we are recommending. We have found out that prescriptions coming from Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid are a little costing us more money, and so we are providing for a different tier for those where there would be a little extra premium on those prescriptions if you go to those pharmacies. So Aaron is here, Lori is here for any questions you all may have on this change, the proposed changes to the plan that would go into effect January 1st.
I have one question and then one compliment. I'll start with the compliment. I attended an open enrollment meeting, and I thought both of you ran an excellent meeting and answered lots of questions. And anytime there was confusion, I felt like you had a good answer to it, and you were patient with people as they worked through it. And so oftentimes people just need to be heard, and that solves a lot of problems. That's the compliment. My question is that if the employee selects the RBP plan, and they have an existing HRA account, why is it that they can only access that HRA account if the cost is $150 or more?
I think that was a recommendation from our consultant to help transition people over to the new plan. We believe that the lower copays are manageable. They can be used from the Flex account, and we want people to save that money in case they do have a large cost copay that they didn't plan for. No one plans to go to the emergency room. They don't plan to have an inpatient stay in the hospital. And so, that helps them to save for those, big dollar copays, and then be able to use the flex money, of course, that might come from their wellness incentive or that they put away for those smaller dollar copays.
Is there any advantage or disadvantage to the city? I assume that if the employees put that money in the account, it's actually in the account. So it's not as if we have to come up with that money later. It's reserved.
HRA money or the flex money?
The HRA money.
That is not put in by the employee, that's put in by the city.
Right, but what I mean
Yes.
is it's safe.
Correct.
What disadvantage is there to the city for the employee to be able to use that at a lower threshold, say $30, as opposed to $150?
I don't know that there's a disadvantage. I think that, again, this was a recommendation by the consultant to help people transition to this new plan.
I would personally like to see that. I understand that there needs to be a threshold. I'm on board entirely with the plan. I think it's a good plan, but I've not, other than it's a recommendation, I haven't heard a compelling reason why it has to be 150 as opposed to 50 or 30 that allows that money to be more into play for the employee. What happens to that money if the employee leaves?
If they retire, it would go as part of their retirement package. But if they resign and it's not a retirement, that money is forfeited, which is how it happens today.
I get it, and I get it, and I get that this, I understand. I won't belabor it any further. Thank you.
I want to compliment the entire, whoever was the architect of this, the choice plan, having a choice, but really for just digging in and getting a very reasonable, well-put-together healthcare plan. In this market, in this environment, it's very difficult, especially out there in the private sector, to get quality health insurance at a very affordable price. So I personally want to say thank you to whoever worked. I know Lori and you did, Aaron, but there's probably others in the system that I just want to say thanks. Thanks for keeping our costs affordable and our benefits high. Appreciate it.
I want to piggyback on that and say I really just appreciate both of you all the questions and pestering about trying to understand as much as we can about this new plan and this option. Even though it's not a new plan in the world, it's new to us. And so thank you for helping us get educated and learn more about it. And specifically, I just wanted to thank you all for the values that you have expressed and your care for our employees and what has motivated you to want to make sure that this is not just about cost saving for the city and the bottom line, but you really want to make sure that we have a health plan that also is beneficial to our employees and their families, and that's cost savings for them. And I'm just grateful that you two just bring all of that together to the table and the care that you show for our employees, and I'm grateful for that. And I just had one sort of clarifying question too around the retirement reimbursement account. You mentioned that there is some cost in terms of maintaining that HRA account for retirees. And so you're going to let them know that they have, I think, 2 years is in here to use it. But I'm just curious, again, in terms of if it drops below 150, then they just lose it. What would be, I guess, why add that and just giving them 2 years to use it however they want to? And then after 2 years, it's gone. Why also put in the $150 mark?
It could potentially all be used in the first year and then $57 remain or something like that. That's not really functional for them. But we still pay MedBen for that account. So we pay a monthly price for the number of accounts that we have open. And so that was a number suggested. That is, once it goes below that, how functional is it for people? So, and it wouldn't go until the end of the year. So if they get, say, to like $149 and it's only 14 months, but there's still a full calendar year, it would stay in until that next calendar year ups. So it wouldn't cut off like the minute it goes under 150 or anything like that.
Okay, so you're saying at the end of the year, if there's just 150, it's a concurrent thing either?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if it's less than 2 years and they've slipped below 150 at the end of the year, the account would be closed.
At the end of the first year or the 2 years?
If it's within their 2 years of retirement, when we go and we look at it at the end of the calendar year, if it's under 150, it would close. If it is within their 2 years and it's over that, it would remain open until it hits 2 years since their retirement. So either or.
Questions?
So I just wanted to, I have some sort of open questions that we haven't finally sort of figured out some nuances that I just have some questions about. And so I just plan to abstain at this vote until I get more information that'll take a little bit to understand fully the implications of the new plan. So I just wanted to explain that.
Beasley Brown.
Abstain.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. For 2019-194.
Municipal order approving and authorizing out-of-town travel expenses for City Manager Jeffrey Meisel to attend the International City County Management Association Conference in Nashville, Tennessee.
So moved.
Nash, second. Perigin. You've seen the information and the conference that he went to. Any comments or questions from Mr.
I've got an hour presentation I was going to give
Please
on it.
call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
You got
Wilkerson.
it, Jeff.
First reading of ordinance BG 2019-50.
Ordinance amending Code of Ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapter 15, Business and General Regulations of the City of Bowling Green Code of Ordinances to add Subchapter 15-8, Regulation of Mobile Food Vendors and Push Carts on Public Rights-of-Way, and Chapter 27, Property Code, Subchapter 27-8, Penalties related to mobile food units and push carts.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perigin, second by Nash. Mr. Meisel?
Many months ago, we put together a work group made up of multiple representatives from, I would say, representatives from multiple departments, sorry. And we got to talking about what we could do about the food truck regulations. We had nothing. It was, as Brent Childers mentioned, it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. And so we got to looking at what other cities were doing. We looked at Atlanta, we looked at Louisville, we looked all over the place and got samples of their ordinances. We thought we needed to talk to the food truck operators themselves, so we scheduled a meeting and we had that with them a couple months ago, got their input and ideas on what we could do. Talked about the changes to Fountain Square Park with the parking and that sort of thing. And so at the fall retreat, we presented most of these main highlights and ideas to you. And tonight, Gene has been working on an ordinance to amend these two chapters where we feel this fits in, chapters 15 and 27. And I'd like to turn it over to Gene to give you an overview if you would like, or just answer any questions that you might have.
Preference? I think Mr. Bryan is here. Were you given information ahead of time? Any comments or questions then?
I do have one.
Yes, sir.
When we started this project related to food trucks, as it coordinates with downtown redevelopment on the square, it was my understanding that the squared off ends of the circle, the oval that is now a square, were going to be set up for food trucks. And then as the process evolved, it became that the food truck's serving window is on the wrong side, which puts people standing potentially in a lane of traffic, or the line being in the lane of traffic. What I would like to see happen, I'm good with this, but that we look at a way that during high traffic times, that we have an in period and an out period where we would assist those trucks to getting into those in spots, holding up traffic for 5 minutes so that, they can drive in. I'm thinking of sitting on Main as if you're heading towards the river, State Street, turning from there left onto State Street, even though it's a one-way, but we have traffic stop so that that food truck can pull into that in parking space. Not every day. I realize I assume we can't allocate people to do that every day. But it feels like the spaces are deep enough that the truck is, out of the lane of traffic, which would then allow the patron or the line to form inside the park as opposed to out in the road. Because one of the things that I liked most about all of this, not the only thing, but one of the things that I like most about all of it, is that we would have food trucks that were on the square. Now, I realize we have some spots that are slightly off the square, and I think that's a reasonable compromise, but I wonder under certain circumstances, could we not work with all the various departments that are involved to say, concert in the park? If concert in the park starts at 11, at 10:15, they, register to be one of those trucks that pulls in there, and at 10:15, we're going to hold traffic for 5 minutes until a truck can pull in, or 2 trucks, or 3 trucks, whatever it is.
Yeah, when we were putting this together, we're trying to balance the needs of everyone, residents, food truck operators. But I think in your example, when we have a special event downtown, such as a concert in the park or the Christmas thing or whatever, that's a special event. This was written for the everyday use of right-of-way and parking spaces and that sort of thing. So I think your requests could be most likely honored and accommodated for special events that whether we host or DRA or whatever on certain nights, certain special events. This ordinance, though, is written for the everyday Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday use of the right-of-way streets in that area, Fountain Square. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yes.
but we can definitely look at your idea. I hated, too, that we could, the way it worked out, I didn't think far enough ahead that all of the food truck windows were on the passenger side of the vehicles, and that we weren't going to be able to use those in spaces of the square. But I think we can definitely look into your idea of that wrong way type parking
I realize on
for special
some-
events.
On a
so
special event, but I guess I'm thinking.
I just don't know if we can do it every day.
I'm not looking for every day. I don't think that's a wise use of manpower to be able to do that every day. But is Scare on the Square that just happened an event? Or is that just something that the business owners around the square put together? And so I'm not looking for just concert in the park, but for other events where they're going down there, but they're not officially sanctioned events by the city or the DRA, but yet they're still events.
I think it's got to be either a city-sanctioned event or a park rental for the whole use of the park. If you've got a wedding down there and they've rented the park on a Saturday and they maybe want a food truck, then
No, I
maybe
was
we
thinking more
accommodate
open
that.
to the public events. Scare on the Square would be a great example because really nobody's renting the park, although there's plenty of kids and families inside the park. You know,
I guess I'm thinking more when times when Main and Park Row are closed, that we would honor your request, but we can look at it.
that's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
I can talk to Chief.
I just had a question about the decibel level we have in here. I know we talked about just some reference points of how loud is it for other examples beyond just listing the decibel. If you could remind me again how loud.
This is a team approach.
Yeah.
Brent is our decibel expert.
No, I do not have that title. I will be sure of that. I believe it was somewhere around a lawnmower. And that is also the point where hearing damage starts to begin. So we're trying to keep it at that point for safety, I guess audiological safety. Throw out a term now that I get the podium for a little bit. And that was the kind of maximum point because higher than that point is when hearing damage can begin.
So there could be sorry.
Here?
Hearing damage in here?
No, hearing damage at a decibel level greater than 80 is when hearing damage can occur, when people start losing functionality of their hearing. So I don't have the scale in front of me exactly without Googling it real quick, but there are certain devices that produce, a chainsaw runs at higher than 80 decibels. That's why the manufacturer tells you to wear hearing protection. Below 80 decibels is you're safe without any type of hearing protection.
Are you talking about us here and people hearing out there and so on?
Well, yeah, because I see the time in here is that they could be operating up to 2:30 a.m. And so I'm just trying to get an understanding of the noise outside at 2 a.m. and just trying to make sure I understand that.
Understand? Talking about the noise emitted from the generator, Joe. One of the concerns that we kept hearing was some of the generators that were used by some of the food trucks downtown were very loud. And there are other generators that work in a different capacity, that work in a different function, that are much quieter. They operate at a lower decibel level. So instead of mandating you have to have this specific generator, we set a maximum decibel output, and that maximum number is where hearing damage begins. Now, there's a lot of other functionalities related to hearing, and I'm not going to get into the whole how all that works, but there's a lot of other environmental factors, distance factors, sound absorbing things that can go into that. So what we said was the manufacturer or the generator that you use cannot be greater than this number based on the manufacturer.
If I go and get a hot dog there, I'm not gonna be there all day. I'm gonna be leaving. I don't understand. I really
It's not
don't
just the
understand
individual.
Huh?
I understand. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't understand the noise question.
It's the people that live downtown that can hear it inside their apartments. There's trucks that are that loud right now, or were. Some of them have made modifications, but that's a problem we were having with a couple of the food trucks. The generators were so loud you could hear them inside the upstairs apartments around the square. That's how loud they were.
I used to work on the square in my former position, second floor office, interior office, wasn't on the exterior of the building. There are 2 food trucks, I don't want to name here, but when they were on the square, I knew it, every time. Because I would think something was wrong in the building, because I could hear this rumbling going on. So it's not necessarily about the guy getting the hot dog and leaving, it's about the people who remain there, you know, for 2 or 3 hours during that kind of lunch period. And can we control the sound for those people as well?
One other comment I'd like to make is I forgot to mention, but there are a lot of cities that have food truck lots downtown. And that was one thing that we got from the food truck operators, that they would love to have a designated lot just to go set up on, but we do not have that to offer them. We couldn't think of any property where we could put them, and so that's something that could be looked at down the road, but that's common in a lot of cities. But what we're proposing tonight is to use the loading and unloading zones. It'll kind of spread them out. I think that'll help with the noise as well, but they'll still be right there on the corners of Fountain Square for people to use. So kind of tried to compromise.
Questions of me? Okay.
Roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Mayor, gentleman wants
Oh, I'm
to
sorry,
speak.
Mr. Bryant, come on up. I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
I have one question. Who is in charge of the enforcement of the 80 decibels? As I've been told, the police department has gotten rid of their decibel meters. And is it going to be a complaint-driven situation? Or are we just going to self-police this situation? Or are the police department going to come and bring a decibel meter and actually enforce it?
There are decibel readers basically available by app, I believe, on phones that officers all carry, mobile devices. So we have not worked out all of the logistics with the police department on the enforcement of this, but we will. And so that'll be part of the next step after this is approved.
And is the decibel level just for the generator, or is it for the entire noise production of the truck?
It's the
Whether that
entire,
be a PA system
it's
or-
the entire noise production. We've got in the ordinance that there would be no amplified sound permitted on the trucks. Gene, help me out where that is.
But the actual language about the 80 decibels applies just to generators. It says all generators should be rated at or below 80.
But we have said amplified music is not permitted, so they're not
amplified
allowed to
music's
have
not.
any speakers mounted to the trucks that would add to the noise.
Call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, second reading of ordinance BG 2019-45.
Ordinance renaming street. Ordinance approving the renaming of a portion of Beauty Avenue to Maintenance Avenue.
So moved.
Perigin, second by Nash. This is a second reading of changing the name of a half a block street. Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, second reading of ordinance BG 2019-46.
Ordinance relating to budget amendment. Ordinance approving amendment number 1 to the City of Bowling Green, Kentucky annual operating budget for fiscal year 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Nash. Second reading of information presented at the last meeting. Are there further comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Up the late final item, municipal order 2019-196.
Municipal order authorizing the purchase of properties necessary for the construction of the Connector Road related to the Southwest Parkway project, including the trading of properties with Weston Apartments LLC.
So moved.
Perigin, second by Nash.
I'm going to give you the short of this, and Greg can kind of fill in the details or the gaps. But basically, the original design of the connector for the South Industrial Park, they realized was not a real good design, and so the redesign basically shifted the road just a bit, and so additional property was needed to be acquired, and we had end up with surplus property on one side and the need for property on the other side where the road shifted. We try to put a map, or we have put a map in your packets The red pinkish is where the original design was going to go, or the road was going to go, and then the new blue and green, I think, is the proposed new design for the road. But the state is paying for this, and we had to close on this, I think, on Friday, and so Gene or Greg, you all want to fill in any more details on this? It's about 8 acres, or, 8 acres.
So Jeff's right, exactly. There are 3 property owners that we had to negotiate and purchase right-of-way for this project. And again, the project's coming about as a way to fulfill the need for the connection to Southwest Parkway. I think you all understand that. And so what happened was, as we got into detailed design with the transportation cabinet and with the property owner, Weston Apartments, that own the piece and the portion nearest Russellville Road, there was a desire to move the intersection at Russellville Road further away from, there's an existing structure there, a barn, by the property owner, and also to make the intersection with Russellville Road work better and be more safe. And so that's why the original property that was purchased back in 2003 or 4 or 5, whenever that was, we kind of swapped that back and then purchased the actual right-of-way we need based upon that realignment. So the whole reason for bringing this here is because of the property give back and then, or resale at the same price that we're buying the property for. Is that a good synopsis?
And the state's now closed on all 3 acquisitions, but none of the property owners have yet been paid. So we'd like to go and get this approved and make sure everybody get paid. The city will make the payment, but then we will recoup the money from the state.
Greg, does this new road line up with an existing traffic light on Russell Road? Was that part of the reason, or am I imagining that?
No, it does not, but what it does is gets it in a better location for that if it were to happen later on. So it's a better alignment based upon traffic and safety for Russellville Road.
Comments or questions? Call the roll.
Easley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, there's no one here to make any public comments. We'll take just a couple of minute recess and come back for the last item. return from recess to consider Municipal Order 2019-195.
Municipal order acknowledging receipt of the investigation report and settlement agreement, and further acknowledging the settlement agreement resolves and concludes the ethics investigation involving Commissioner Brian Slim Nash.
Second.
Mr. Nash, you had a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, in accordance with the Bowling Green, Kentucky Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Section 2, Number 19, titled Action by the Board of Commissioners, I disclose that I have a conflict of interest regarding Municipal Order 2019-195 in that it is an ethics investigation involving myself. In addition, as dictated in Chapter 2, Section 2, Number 19, I will now leave the room during any open session discussion, and I shall not participate in any discussions involving the proposed agenda item. Thank you.
Mr. Pruitt, Chairman of our Ethics Board.
Mayor and Commissioners, on behalf of the Board of Ethics, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight. The mission of the Board of Ethics is to aid in the governing standards of integrity in the city government and to support the officials and employees of the City of Bowling Green in maintaining these standards. It is expected that everyone will conduct themselves in a manner that preserves public confidence in city government and respect for the office or the position represented. Our duty as a board is to investigate complaints, issue orders, advisory opinions, control and maintain financial statements for those required to file, and enforce the city's code of ethics policy for those who fall under its jurisdiction. Earlier this year, the Board of Ethics was called upon to fulfill those duties regarding Commissioner Nash's conduct while leaving a local public event. Our board members, Joanna Futrell, Debbie Peoples, who's in the audience tonight, Joanne Powell, and Mike Riggs, and myself, accepted that task with forethought and carefully executed our duty. We spent many hours ensuring that we followed the Bowling Green Code of Ordinance, Chapter 25, Code of Ethics, and the policies outlined for complaints. As you all know, sometimes governing is hard. Tonight, the Board of Ethics asks that you acknowledge our settlement agreement with Commissioner Nash. But I want to mention that our work is not finished. Through this process and working with our special counsel, we have identified necessary changes in the Code of Ethics and policies for complaint procedures. Our next order of business is to address those items and bring back recommended changes to this body for adoption. I want to thank our Board of Ethics members, our City Clerk, Ashley Jackson, and our Special Counsel, Stacy Blankenship, for their help in upholding the standard of integrity. Thank you.
Right. Do you have any comments, Ms. Blankenship?
No, sir, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything, but I don't need prepared comments.
I will have one question for you. Mr. Nash has unexpectedly left the room. As we were unaware, we were expecting him to participate in providing any comments that he might have to this board. Did he have the opportunity to present those comments to the Board of Ethics and to you as part of the investigators?
Yes, sir. I met with Mr. Nash and his counsel a couple of weeks ago, and we negotiated this agreement. And obviously, during that process, I probably met with him for about 2 hours. I mean, he certainly had some comments that he made at that time.
When you presented the findings to the board, was he present for that and had an opportunity to make any comments at that time? We just want to make sure that
yes, sir. So he was present at the time when I did present the findings to the board, and he certainly could have asked. He did not ask to present those. I don't think that he disputed the ultimate conclusions that I had in my agreement. In fact, in response to your provisions, your ethics rules do state that when I present my findings and after the Board of Ethics adopts them, that he has 7 days in which to file a response if he objected to any of the conclusions in the report, and he did not do so.
Guess what I'm trying to get to is, since he's not here to defend himself, that he had access to due process throughout the entire investigative scenario.
Yes, sir. I feel that your procedures set forth sufficient due process procedures for him. He was able to attend the meetings as well as had the opportunity to file a written response if he felt that there was anything in my report that he disagreed with. I'm sure that he didn't, I'm going to say, agree with all of the interview process, but ultimately my conclusions were based on the facts that I could prove versus ones that were in dispute, and so I think that the conclusions ultimately he agreed with.
Were some of the complaint that was not found to have sufficient evidence to support those charges?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Pruitt or Ms. Blankenship?
Relates to the actual charges, I'm sorry. There's a suspended license, a moving of a vehicle under the influence. I think the public wants to know if in your speaking with any of the law enforcement agencies or folks that were a part of that, how that came to be. That seems to be our biggest concern. I have a huge amount of respect for our sheriff's department and our city policing agencies, but it just looked like a lot was kind of just let go.
Yes, Commissioner. So in speaking with the sheriff's department, they were aware of the suspended license. Let me put it this way, only one of the sheriff's deputies was aware of the suspended license. It was not the charging officer. I think the deputy that was aware of it did not convey it to the actual charging officer, and so that was not included as a charge. Although it was conveyed to the officer that did not convey it to the charging officer by 911. For some reason, that was a disconnect there. As far as whether it should have been a DUI versus an alcohol intoxication charge, certainly there's, I think reasonable police officers would differ on that. The ultimate decision by the charging officer was that he had reviewed the criminal file from a previous incident in which Mr. Nash was charged with a DUI, and due to possibly a limp that he had or something along those lines, the field sobriety tests were suppressed, and so as a result, the court had dismissed that DUI. That officer felt like that he would be in the same situation if he had given him field sobriety test there, that even though he may have found him to have failed the field sobriety test, that they ultimately would be suppressed, and the charges would be dismissed. So he chose to do an alcohol intoxication charge instead of a DUI. That was his explanation for it. I had to take him for his word. I can tell you that ultimately that issue was not the purpose that you all had me here. My purpose was, did anything about Mr. Nash's conduct or anything that he did or said lead to that? And I could not, in interviewing anyone, conclude that he had suggested, hey, I'm a city commissioner, therefore give me something less than a DUI or anything along those lines. Apparently it was a decision made by that sheriff's deputy that he just didn't want his case to be dismissed and thought he could charge him with alcohol intoxication and not worry about it under those circumstances.
And that officer or other officers have that choice to make as police officers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Questions for Mr. Pruitt or Ms. Blankenship? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you so much for everything that you've done. I personally thanked you, but I want to do that publicly also.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, of course.
Any comments before we vote?
No, other than to thank the committee. In my opinion, you've done an excellent job based on what you had to do. And we will look at any suggestions that you have for us to consider that will make you do a better job in the future. Good job.
First, I do want to also thank the Ethics Board for your service to our city. I know that could not have been fun, and I'm sure it caused a lot of just personal distress and a burden that we have asked you to lift for all of us. And so I just really want to sincerely thank you all for the many hours that you have put into helping us come out of this situation as best as we can. I also want to address the citizens of Bowling Green and say that the City of Bowling Green Board of Ethics policies declare that the people have a right to expect that every public official and employee will conduct himself or herself in a manner that will tend to preserve public confidence in and respect for the government he or she represents. It is clear that this situation involving Commissioner Nash has caused citizens in our city to lose confidence in and respect for our government. This is an untenable situation. There seems to be no easy fix or answer, and I feel like it's no matter what we do, it's lose-lose. In these moments when I feel ill-equipped for the task in front of me, I find peace in the scriptures. And in this instance in particular, Micah 6:8 comes to mind, which says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God." Therefore, with a humble hope of restoring justice while offering mercy in this difficult situation, I vote to accept this settlement from the Board of Ethics. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, again, thank you all for your hard work. And it is a very awkward situation that I think all of us find ourselves in as committee members and as elected officials. And you know, I'm reminded of an old Allman Brothers song, "I'm no angel," and I am no angel, but I feel that that our actions are really important. Dana just referred to negativity in neighborhoods that affect others and their properties. Well, negativity in our actions out in public also affect us greatly, and so what I think the most important, I also pray for Slim and that things in his life get better. My personal compassion is worthy here. But what I think hits to the core for me, a couple things, is the public perception that us as elected officials, and I'm just not talking just about the Board of Commissioners, I'm talking about the magisterial folks over there at Fiscal Court, our mayor, our judge, certainly our new elected sheriff, the judge that saw this case. I've just seen a lot of, well, not just seen, I hear it every day out in the general public. My job requires me to be out into the community around a lot of people, and it's every day. And that there is some sort of other set of rules that we operate by as elected officials than every other citizen in this community. And I would like to speak to the general public and assure you that that is just not the case. It may be perceived to be the case, and it may be. I can't speak for what happened there that night and what happened 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but I can speak for, me as an elected official, that I would expect myself to have no different circumstance than any other citizen when it comes to violations like these out there in the public. So there's not a different set of rules. At least I don't see them. If anything, we live in a fishbowl, and we're looked at day to day to day in our interactions in the community and our votes up here on the commission. And I feel like our fishbowl just got giant. Like now we're in a giant fishbowl, and we're just scrutinized to an extent due to somebody else's actions. So I want to assure people of that. And the other thing is, just the last thing that I want to say about all this is, I feel like we need to look at our code of ethics and see where it lands when we go down these roads based on an elected official, that we spend taxpayer money when it's found to be an ethical violation. Sometimes when you got attorneys fighting against each other, when there's a winning side and a losing side, and typically the losing side pays the fees. That's usually how it goes. So I just want us to maybe, as a board or as a, look forward into how to avoid spending taxpayer money in these types of situations. Hopefully we won't have another one of these, and this will be a non-thing. But it's ironic that we talked about $16,000 on a parking lot when it's basically $16,000 that we're spending here. And I just want us to maybe take a look at that as maybe a way to add to the code of ethics to maybe not expose citizens. I mean, this could be something, this could be $250,000. We don't know what the next violation will be and how large it will be and how much it might impact our budget. So, now I respect Slim, I respect everybody up here, every elected official, and I just, I hope things moving forward get a lot better. So, thank you.
I want to thank the Ethics Board for their hard work. This is a considerable amount of time and pressure and discomfort in dealing with an issue like this. I know that's not generally what you thought the Ethics Board would be when you accepted that appointment. But we accept those conclusions and your result. Personally, I'm disappointed at the least, not the Ethics Board, but in the behavior that was addressed here, and clearly angry, because if the individual who caused this doesn't understand the number of staff hours and people hours that have taken up by the behavior that was exhibited and had to be investigated with the Ethics Board through the hearing of the complaints and the investigation, and the clerk who had the brunt of all the complaints coming in and coordinating with all the parties to try to get everything squared away, to senior management having to deal with all the questions that came in from staff and the public, and to all the staff having to deal with the myriad of jokes and comments around the community. And I know that the elected officials have not received just a few, not a lot, but hundreds, and in my case, thousands of comments, to the point that it's very difficult to focus on city business. And this entire situation is just demoralizing to all of city staff and the community at large. I think it's make us a laughingstock statewide. And the part of it is he was one of the most vocal supporters for the amending of the ethics ordinance, which included violations of local, state, or federal law, and here we are dealing with it. I firmly believe that every member of this Board of Commissioners would have done the honorable thing and not put the city through all this, but here we are dealing with it. And to be quite honest with you, had the evidence of the investigation showed some of what had been reported, we'd be voting on something entirely different tonight. And I want Commissioner Nash to understand that this is all on him. It's including the responsibility of the city having to incur the expenses of this investigation. And tonight, it begins a 28-day suspension for Mr. Nash. At the end of those 28 days, he'll take his seat back up here just like anybody else. And I've got a chapter in this particular book here to give to him, and I hope he understands that that chapter talks about two individuals who had some very serious differences between them. but they were able to put them together and come back to work again. And for the last 2,000 years, they've been standing side by side praising God in heaven. So I want to thank Paul for writing to Philemon about Onesimus and how they worked through very different circumstances, but were able to come together. So we look forward to his return in 28 days. Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash, who is abstaining. Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, meeting's adjourned.